Appamada's programs and facilities are supported through your generosity. Your support really does make a huge difference. You'll find a link for contributions on the website at appamada.org/contribute. Thank you so much.
So we'll begin. It's 2:00, and I'm happy to see everyone. And I thought I'd give a little bit of an introduction, but first, maybe you want to introduce yourself and say a little bit about why you thought you might want to take this class on rebirth and karma. So let's see, the best way to do this is usually alphabetical by first names. So if you click on the participants tab in the bottom of your window, everybody's name will come up. Maria and I are not alphabetical because we're hosting, but let's just say, we'll start with Donna. We'll just say a little bit about why you thought this class. So,
for me, it was Bhikkhu and Alio. Really, pretty much anything he does is well worth time spent. So that's why I'm here.
That's great. Yeah. Donna, it's so good to see you. So I think, seriously, you're actually ahead of Donna in the alphabet, but you came in right after. So we're just say your name and then why you were interested in this class. What drew you to this class?
Hi, everyone. My name is Circe Sturm. And I think what drew me to this class is that in part because I got married just a week ago as of today. Peg did the honors. I've been dealing with a lot of major life transitions and issues of birth and death of various forms, including aging father who's quite ill. And so it just feels like that's up right now. And I wanted to explore this topic more deeply.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Folks who just entered, we're just saying our names and what drew us to the class. What drew you to this particular class? So, I think Darcy would be probably next.
I'm just attracted to the big question, for a myriad of reasons, and I wanted to take advantage of this class from our master teacher. So that's it. And wanted to be with all you.
Yeah, it's a lot of people signed up for this class. So Chris, we're just saying our name and what drew us to this class. So we're sort of going alphabetical. So you would be next.
Me, Chris?
Yes.
Okay. Chris Schulman. And rebirth and karma have only been lightly mentioned in all of the studies and classes that I've taken, and I'm very interested in this. So I'm grateful you're offering this.
So I think Ellen might be next.
Yeah, I'm Ellen Hippard. I wanted to see what Peg had to say about this topic. And I just started reading this book that was on our reading list, and I'm very impressed with the book. And I think he's quite courageous. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I'm here.
Okay. I think it would be Gail would be next.
Hi, it's good to be here with you, Peg, and everybody. I have a great deal of curiosity around this topic. My mother passed away this year, and I have a good friend who's, having a terminal illness. And I think I've always wondered about it. And I was very intrigued about the PDF attachment Peggy sent, and how there are 3 different ways of, people kind of fall into 3 different camps of the way they think about death. And I'm in kind of the last camp. Like, I don't know, so why should we talk about it? But I was really intrigued that the Buddha had some insight, and I would love to hear that point of view.
Janie.
If my dog starts barking, I'll mute it again. Well, I just saw your offering, and there's been so much death in the past few years, and it's just a topic I've been curious about, because I'm afraid of death, and I'm still kind of like grappling with it, that we're going to all die. What does this mean? And so that, I don't know. That's why I enrolled in the class. And also I miss everybody from Appamada.
Well, we miss seeing you. It's you're far away.
I know. I'm so glad to see some familiar faces here.
It's good to be together.
Yeah.
So, Trish?
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Christoph, and I've been studying biology and physics for a long time, and in those fields, death is not a thing. There's no laws that talk about death. And in our Zen tradition, it's also very sparsely tended to. And from what I know of the Buddha's original teachings, he spoke about it rhetorically, and I don't know the extent to which I'm curious about which part is the rhetorical part and which part he actually believed himself. And so I'd like to turn to Peg's wisdom in helping me suss that out.
Lisa. So great to see you, Lisa.
Wonderful to be here. I'm very moved, and it's good to feel so connected to people, even across Zoom. So death is something that has interested me, I would say, even since early childhood. And I lived in Cairo in Egypt when I was from about, for 5 years, about 18 months to 7 years. And I remember going out in the desert and seeing skeletons curled up in a fetal position at burial sites and collecting mummy beads. And of course, things stick in your mind and they don't mean much at the time. You don't always know how intrigued you are, but those images have stayed with me. They're very visceral. I was very moved by them. And then when I lived in San Antonio for about 30 years, I really loved the Day of the Dead and learned as much about it as I could. And I liked the culture around it. So I'm very interested in the culture of death. I think the culture that surrounds death. And I would say, rather than a biological perspective, I'm more interested in maybe what I would a poetic perspective, or a lyrical perspective. And I've had deaths that moved me profoundly. I had to put down a perfectly healthy cat because its brother died, and he basically died of a broken heart. And what is the rebirth piece? That really intrigues me almost more than the death. So I can imagine that I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say, Peg, and what everybody has to say.
Okay. Mehdi?
Yeah, I am really curious and about this learning opportunity. And, the aging process, which I am going through because of my age, and the subtle changes in my, memory functions, in my bodily, functions, and whatever, has come with me up to this point, and then is going to continue. I am really looking at it with interest, without any fear. I am pretty much accepting it and trying to make it a really interesting process, actually, for myself, rather than, being afraid of the outcome. And I don't think about, I hope whatever is the outcome is not going to be a suffering type too much. Anyway, I am just, maybe philosophically, I am interested to hear more about the maybe concepts of this process, and it would be very helpful to me, maybe.
I think we missed Leslie. We jumped right over you.
I'm Leslie, and I wanted to sign up this course because I've enjoyed the last couple that you've taught since I've been meeting with Appamada. And something you said, and I think it was cause and effects in the last, all goes back to birth. That's been fascinating to me. So I'm hoping to learn more about that.
Okay, Milan.
Hi, I am here because I have always been very intrigued about what is life, and I have not been in touch at all with these ideas about reincarnation and all that. So that is a completely new exploration to me. And also my mom had a stroke at the beginning of the year. So my sister and I have been facing, all that. So that's why I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah, well, welcome. Roger.
I've always found the topic of rebirth to be quite fascinating, and actually felt pretty dismissive of it until recent years. And anyway, the distinction between rebirth and reincarnation, if there is one, I don't know. I just find it a little confusing. So I was hoping to, gain some insight and clarity through this class. So.
Maybe we'll do that together. Sandra.
Well, it's very nice to be here with all of you. So when I was reading your introduction to this class, it really brought me a lot of curiosity and interest. So, and the reason I'm here just to see what's your perspective to karma and reincarnation. I'm looking forward to this class.
Mm. Yeah. And Susan, I think you're our last person.
Alphabetically, I'm last. Hi, everyone. I am here just because it's a topic we don't typically talk about. So raised my curiosity, and also because Peg's teaching the course. I just wanted a chance to spend more time with Peg.
Well, thank you. It's really helpful for me to hear what brought you here. Hopefully what I offer will be useful. I can't remember, did I send you the PDF of the questions, the Buddha's questions on that he answered on death and transmigration? Good. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, personally, I became kind of fascinated by this topic because of just starting to read Bhikkhu Analayo's book, Rebirth, and his take on it. So I thought, this is something I really want to share. So please don't worry if you didn't get the PDF, because it is not preparation for today. And it'll be part of what will be sent to you. So don't worry about that. I couldn't, I have sent it out, I think, after a talk I did on this topic. So some people might have gotten it that way. But put everything you know about it out of your mind. Basically, this class is intended as an inquiry, and I'll provide some of what I've uncovered in the sort of reading that I've done and study that I've done. But it's not, as you know, in Buddhism, dogmatic. It's really a matter of open inquiry. So, however, you'll see the Buddha in the first reading that we have makes some assertions quite, I'd say, authoritatively. And you can decide for yourself whether those are persuasive or not persuasive or whatever. But in any event, this is a PDF that I have is a Tibetan translation, but they've lost what it was translated from, whether from the Chinese or whether from the Sanskrit, or so they just have the Tibetan version, and it's just recently been translated. So I'll talk about that when I talk about the text. But I feel like there's kind of a need for this because we're all surrounded by a lot of death and dying. There's still 500 people a day dying of COVID in this country, and it's not well known. I mean, people don't want to even think about it. And many of you mentioned situations that you're involved in directly of people either dying or close to dying or aging. And so all of us are touched by this topic. What does it mean, the whole issue of death and dying, and what does Buddhism have to say about this? So I felt like it would be a good thing for us to explore right now. There's a lot of grieving that we haven't done as a collective, process for what's been happening, the isolation that people have suffered, and all of that. So it felt to me like this was a timely topic. The structure of the class, the format I make use of, many of you know, the teachings I've been researching or studying, some writing that you will do, some small group activities, some large group discussions, some practices and homework, and then I make use also of koans and poetry. So that's sort of woven into the class. In this 5 weeks, the first 2 weeks will be talking about this text, this Tibetan text, with the questions on death and transmigration. And then the weeks 3 and 4 will be talking about what Analayo presents in Rebirth as the early teachings of the Buddha. So this is polycanon kinds of things. Then the last class, we'll talk a little bit about infinite life. You don't need to buy all these books. They're definitely worthwhile. But if you can get them on loan from the library, or if you just want to sort of see if the class leads you to an interest in them, because they're not, it's not cheap to buy books. But if you discover, I want to go into this in more depth, as a result of the class, you certainly don't need to, and they're not required. But I will send out the text, the Tibetan text, because it's just a PDF. Okay. Any questions about that? About how sort of the sequence is going to go? So we're going to move from this Tibetan translation, which appears to be quite old, then the early Buddhist teachings, and then this kind of Mahayana view that comes from infinite life, and the sort of teachings of that Robert Thurman offers. And then we'll also talk about Zen teaching some in that last class, and see where we go, where we end up. So let's see. So first of all, about this little text. It's a short sutra. It doesn't exist in Sanskrit, as I said, or nor was it translated into Chinese. There's not a Pali counterpart. So in the introduction, it says that, and this is, scholarly stuff. So it's of interest to those of us who are, scholarly driven. But it says, this, let's see, it talks a lot about the revised terminology. There are different forms of Tibetan and what this indicates, what this suggests about the age of this text, which is very old. He says, based on the, comparing of the terminology, we can surmise that the translation was either done relatively early or for some reason outside the 9th century institutional mainstream, so before the 9th century. It's significant both philosophically as well as historically, being a reliable witness to relatively early Indian non-Buddhist views concerning death and the Buddhist polemics against them. So in essence, this text is the Buddha's response to the typical views of the time. So he wants to give a little word about the title, and the key Tibetan term that figures in the title and in the body of the text is Chefo Ba, which literally means shifting lives. I love this, shifting lives. So he's translated, he said, it can have both the sense of death as well as moving to another life, transmigration. So in the sutra, most of the occurrences of the term can be translated by death and dying, but and in other places in the Buddhist canon, that term is used to just mean death. But in this particular, in the final sections of the sutra, there are passages where it has to be understood as referring to transmigration to the next life or to some afterlife. So he translated the title that way. So that's just a little explanation about the title. So here's the scene in this sutra. It's set in Kapilavastu. The Buddha is visiting a funeral in a village, and his father is there also. So it's someone from the Sakya clan who is obviously relatively young. And let's see, his name was Nandaja. And the king decides this is a perfect opportunity to ask the Buddha some questions about death and dying. So he's wondering, because they have all these rituals, they have all this traditional sacrifices and offerings as part of the funeral services. And he wonders what benefit will be derived from all these rituals and offerings that are being performed for the deceased. So he asks the Buddha a number of pertinent questions. So it says, here's the beginning of the story. It starts with homage to all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Thus did I hear at one time. So this is the sort of authorizing of what follows as having come from the Buddha himself. The Blessed One, seeing that time had come to train all the various householders of the great city of Kapilavastu, went there with a retinue of 500 in order to cause them to generate faith. So he's come there with his 500 followers to raise their faith. At that time, a man in the prime of his life called Sakyanandaja, who was cherished by all his relatives and praised by all, had died. In front of his body, his children, wife, relatives, and dependents had gathered together the horses, elephants, clothes, and a variety of ornaments, gold and silver, pearls, crystals, and other jewels, as well as a variety of delicious and sweet food offerings and drink. They offered them wailing, "We give these to Nandaja." So this made King Śuddhodana, that's the Buddha's father, wish to ask the Blessed One, what benefit and good would ensue if, in such a fashion, offerings, food, and honors to the deceased were presented according to the Brahman's formula. He approached the Blessed One, prostrated, and asked, "Blessed One, would you allow me to ask some questions about what it is like for sentient beings to die?" The Blessed One replied, "O great king, ask whatever you wish. It will be explained to the great king's satisfaction." So that's the setup. That's the setting. As you might imagine, everyone is listening intently. What's going to happen next? So this is going to be our first little exercise. there you are. You're in that village. There's a widow wailing and the children wailing. They're all the villagers. They're sort of in shock and grief. The funeral of someone cherished by his family and his village. So imagine you're standing there nearby. This is a perfect opportunity to ask the Buddha, the fully enlightened one, your own questions about death, dying, and what comes afterwards. So this is a little writing assignment for you. We're going to give you a few minutes to do this. Think about it. Write down your own questions that you would ask the Buddha about death and dying and what comes afterwards. So you're going to take a few minutes to reflect, then write the questions you would ask about the great mystery of life and death. And if you finish before other people, just take some time to contemplate your questions. And we're going to just wait until everybody's ready. So when you're done, raise your hand. And when everybody's hand is raised, I'll know everybody's done. So there's no hurry. Nobody needs to be rushed. There's not a time limit. Okay, are you ready? Okay, you got writing implements? You know it's me, so you know you need to have writing implements, right? Okay, all right. And I'm just going to watch. When you're done, raise your hands. You may not have any questions, in which case you can just raise your hand. Okay, we're going to go into some breakout rooms. You'll be with 2 other people, so groups of 3, just to discuss the questions. You're not trying to answer them. You're just trying to see if there's some similarity, what differences there are, what you might notice. So I would say it's just, we'll just do this for about 10 minutes and then we'll come back together. But see whether the questions of your partner surprise you, whether there are similarities, and if anything sparks curiosity or a sense of connection in these questions. Okay? And Maria's going to put you in breakout rooms. Have everybody back?
Yep, all present and correct.
Okay, all right. All right, dogs. Hold on a second. They've decided to get interested in something. They like to remind me when someone is passing by. So anyway, so I'm curious what surprised you that you heard from your partners, and whether you thought about expanding your own list based on what you heard, or whether it aroused your curiosity. So yeah, so we have a little bit of time to discuss what that experience was like. And you can unmute yourself.
Susan asked a really interesting question, whether time is linear, or so that if we're reborn, would we perhaps be reborn in what we think of as the past, or even in some distant future? And does time have any meaning other than we need it to order our lives, but does it have any ultimate meaning or existence? So I love that question.
Yeah. That's a good one. In traditionally, Buddhist view of time is circular, so not linear. So that's a very interesting question to pose, right?
I think we had a lot of overlap in our group, but I asked far more questions than everybody else, but they were sort of what if questions. So I think it was kind of that all of us felt like our questions would be much more expanded if we were getting answers, right? Mm-hmm. But one of the things I sort of asked and was whether in death we had any capacity to interact with life or the living, like not interact, but even witness it. But then that disturbed me greatly, because the thought of being the question that immediately followed for me was, would I be able to influence life? Because it seemed to really challenge my vow as a Buddhist, my Bodhisattva vow, if I would be able to witness life but not be able to influence it. Like, to witness suffering and not be able to do anything about it seemed like a kind of torture. So this all assumes a lot of things, like that there's an ego that is aware, that can see things. But I imagined my little horror show of death. So that's one of the things that came up.
Yeah, no, that's a fascinating thought, isn't it? What relationship is there between the living and the dead? How, and you might even think of it as how they mutually influence each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if at all. So, Mehdi?
I think it just having three of us in a group and then ending it, coming back to a larger group, to me, it was symbolic of three different opinions and views. We were trying within this very short time, to influence each other. And as far as I was concerned, I was very optimistic and happy about this process, and thinking that the outcome will be something better than three of us. It will be a much more bigger issue will come up. I don't know what, we didn't get to that point. But to me, that symbolism was interesting, that at the end, I got that. And I don't want to even go to my own way of looking or philosophy or whatever. But that is the way I look at it, because it's the life that, all these parts are more than just the parts. It's a much more higher, and it continues. And I think there is a tendency towards improvement and betterment. And that is the way I have been, influenced by whatever teachers and So to me, it was interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a really good discussion in our group. We had some really good questions, and for me, I think it's I have a sense of that we're a series of birth and deaths as we're going through life. That's how I experience it. There's kind of all these different births and deaths that go on within me. But it's kind of like when we get to that point of where the body drops away, it's like, what happens to all that is Peg, all that is Christoph, all that is Ellen? What happens to all of that? And this practice is kind of about dropping away the self, all the things that we think we are, but it's that essence, that actual thing that is Maria, that maybe another can't possibly get hold of, or I can't possibly get complete hold of somebody else's, who they are. But then if we drop away self, the energy's that settled, it just kind of settles into the ground, because we've, if we get to the point where we've practiced and dropped everything away. But yeah, what happens to all that is Peg and Maria, and what happens to all of that, and what's our purpose? What's the whole purpose?
That question is more or less frightening to you, depending on how attached you are to a certain or identified you are with a certain ego structure. Yeah. Ellen.
The question that came up for all three of us in one form or another was about continuity between one life and the next. And one of us had the interesting thought about maybe we were all of us Buddhist here. We didn't have Buddhist ancestors biologically. Maybe we all were Asian in a past life, and then, oh yeah, think of all the Christians over there in the East now. And so anyway, that was just one aspect of it. But it was questions about continuity.
Yeah, I think that's a really big question, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes in Zen, there's a kind of refusal to talk about it since it's unknowable. It's a great mystery. And the focus in Zen is on the here and now and what our present moment experience is. But there's a lot in the Zen tradition about these questions. So that's why I think it's really appropriate for us to look at them. And it's also important to know what your questions are. Just what are the questions that are arising for you in the context of this topic. Did anybody find themselves changing their idea about what their questions might be? Yeah, Trish?
I think I took this on a little bit of a meta level, which was I had a question about there being questions that if I like really take to heart the core teachings of the Buddha about dependent origination and mutual causality and impermanence, then that doesn't leave me with much to ask about death. I don't know what else I would ask if I believe those other things to be true.
So that's the question, is whether it's a matter of belief, right?
Right. So meaning, like, not that I believe those things, but if I experience those things as true, then I'm not left with many questions.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. I think they raise a lot of questions for me, but yeah, this is a very interesting thing. Like there is a resistance. We also have a kind of a resistance to probing too much into this mystery. So, yeah, that's interesting. Anything else you want to report? Circe?
One of my questions was, if I become lose any sense of separateness that I maintain right now with an ego state that's part of my human livingness, and in death I become part of something bigger, I thought about I kind of asked what does it mean to be one with what I love now, and also to be one with what I hate or don't love now, what I abhor, because there are things that I abhor right now.
And there is part of you. It's the things that you love, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was also a slightly, and then if I do, the bigger question was, would I mind? Is there any part of me left over that would care?
Right.
That's the scarier question, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this whole class is an exercise in kind of the scary questions in a way. Yeah. Darcy?
So I think we're touching on this, but I just want to say, because several of us in our group had it, and we said it in different ways, was said a little more eloquently, I think, by Roger, but I can't say it that way. What I wrote was, and I think that's why I don't have well, let me just say the question. So how can one be reborn if there's no separate self, And I just don't have a felt or experiential sense of the truth of that. And so if it is some sort of blending with the cosmos going on that there isn't separateness anymore, like in my case, having lost my daughter, I want to know, where is she,
Yeah.
How do you, if there's a way to perceive the energy of those who have transmigrated or whatever it is, how do you do it? That's what I want to know.
Yeah. That's a really fundamental existential question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Lisa?
For me, the questions are really different if I focus on my own death and dissolution than if I focus on the response of others to my death. I don't know quite how to phrase that.
The impact on others.
Yeah, the impact on others. I mean, my beliefs and perceptions might be different than theirs. I mean, I guess for me, it's like, well, I hope I don't die in pain. I hope I don't die quickly. I hope I'm not a nuisance. I hope I'm not a burden. And it's like there's this little part of me. And how can I make it easier, you know, for everybody around me? I think a lot of us have that. And, you know, maybe there are things I can share or say that would make it easier. Well, if you have the belief that, you know, some fundamentalist Christians have, or other people, if you have the belief in rebirth and the comfort, you know, that you're going to be rewarded, well, it's easier for those around you. If you believe, depending on your beliefs, it depends on the impact on your friends and family and even the world.
And it depends on their beliefs.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I don't get to see that. It makes me curious. I mean, look at Queen Elizabeth.
This is what we're doing. We're in the investigation stage now. We're just raising a lot of questions, right?
Yeah.
It's such a great mystery. What?
My questions were from the transcendental to the more mundane or, you know, physical. So many, as the ones you have told here, like, why does life begins and ends? But I have another one that I wanted to add here that has to do with the body, with the physical body. And I was wondering, this thing that we have to feed the body day by day, and it is kind of shocking to me, like, you know, you have to feed it, or not to have, but it is a usual practice to feed it with other life or death beings. And that is a constant practice that you need to do in order to keep alive. So I just wanted to add that very weird thing to the life.
And it's true for all living beings, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that kind of flux and flow. Yeah, the body, just the body itself. Yeah. I mean, we've been a witness to it since we were born, and we still have no idea how does it go from being, you know, two cells that meet into this full-bodied being, right? And how does it keep changing and transforming itself? So, Gail.
Yeah, thinking about what Malen just said and listening to everybody. So we have, you know, we consider ourselves like an ego. And I watched my mother, who had Alzheimer's, and she died of Alzheimer's in August. And that, what I considered my mother, actually regressed back into infancy, almost fetal. It was a fetal state, right? And I watched it happen over a period of months, years, weeks, and then days. It was interesting. So whatever I think of as my mother was mainly made up of memories toward the end. And but then what happened when she actually died, the moment of death, she had her eyes closed for a couple of weeks and she was in a fetal stage. And she actually opened her eyes and something came online. Something came online and looked out of her eyes. And then she passed and that was gone. Mm-hmm. And I want to know, what was that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what that was.
Yeah. But you were there to witness it.
Yeah. Yeah. It was pretty interesting. You know, because she'd been gone for a long time prior to her body actually dropping off.
Right. Yeah. It's a great mystery. Mm. What continues? What ceases? And are we just composed of the memories others have of us and our own memories? So that's very rich, you know, that kind of inquiry this is very rich. I thought, hold on a second. I thought I would share with you a poem at this sort of shift into another activity to find it. It's from this marvelous book of poetry that Marie Howe wrote after her brother died from AIDS. So, and it's the poem is the title of the book, actually, What the Living Do. So some of you are quite familiar with this poem, but I think it's just right for this. What the Living Do. Johnny, the kitchen sink has been clogged for days. Some utensil probably fell down there. And the Drano won't work, but smells dangerous. And the crusty dishes have piled up. Waiting for the plumber, I still haven't called. This is the everyday we spoke of. It's winter again. The sky is a deep, headstrong blue, and the sunlight pours through the open living room windows because the heat's on too high in here and I can't turn it off. For weeks now, driving or dropping a bag of groceries in the street, the bag breaking, I've been thinking, this is what the living do. And yesterday, hurrying along those wobbly bricks in the Cambridge sidewalk, spilling my coffee down my wrist and sleeve, I thought it again, and again later when buying a hairbrush. This is it. Parking, slamming the car door shut in the cold, what you called that yearning, what you finally gave up. We want the spring to come and the winter to pass. We want whoever to call or not, a letter, a kiss. We want more and then more of it. But there are moments, walking, when I catch a glimpse of myself in the window glass, say, the window of the corner video store, and I'm gripped by a cherishing so deep for my own blowing hair, chapped face, and unbuttoned coat that I'm speechless. I am living. I remember you. What the living do. I'm thinking about whether you have time. I was going to give you a little opportunity for a short meditation on dying. And this is a very common meditation topic in all of the Buddhist schools, including in Zen. So first, a little bit of instruction. So this is a common meditation practice in the Buddha's time, all the way up to the present, this meditation on death. It's not morbid or ghoulish, even though we are in Halloween season. It focuses the mind directly on the truth of living and dying. This meditation is not simply to remind you that life is short and precious, which is true. It's an open inquiry into the great mysteries: birth, life and death, impermanence, identity, continuity, suffering, cessation, liberation. So there's a common theme in great enlightenment and profound mystical experience, in near-death experiences, and in some psychoactive drug experiences even moments of awe and wonder, where the person loses all fear of death and dying. The whole mass of denial, dread, distraction, anxiety, panic, grief, all of our attempts to avoid this one monumental fact just evaporate. But this liberation is not only found in some extreme or accidental circumstances. It's also one of the great gifts of meditation. That's what the Buddha taught. So everything in the vast cosmos is constantly transforming and being transformed. From even before our first breath to our last one and beyond, we're engaged in continuous transformation. Some transformation we can directly observe: physical changes like growing taller, getting teeth, hair going gray. Some we experience only internally, such as overcoming a fear of public speaking, or discovering a love of horses, or learning to appreciate classical music, or Zydeco. And some are existential: infancy, childhood, maturing, aging, sickness, decline. What is dukkha, painful or stressful, at every age is different. For a baby, a dropped pacifier; for a child, being excluded from a birthday party; for a teenager, the longing for a crush. And on, a skinned knee, the loss of a friend, a broken heart, a protest against some injustice, a car accident, illness of a beloved friend, death of a parent. Meanwhile, we try to focus on the everyday. The world of our daily living we can somewhat control, at least a little bit. Pay some bills, get the car fixed, feed the dog, make supper, do the laundry, go to work or school, watch the news, cross off something on the to-do list, take care of what matters here and now, what the living do. So this class is a chance to pause and inquire deeply and reflect on your own sense of the great matter of life and death, and learn what the Buddha taught with the transcendent wisdom and compassion of great enlightenment. So perhaps in this way, you'll foster a deep joy in living and some insight and equanimity in facing death, your own and others. So get comfortable, and we'll have just a little short meditation, very brief. Just become still and quiet. Hopefully there's nothing distracting in your environment. And you can turn sideways to the camera if that's less distracting for you. So just sit upright and balanced. This allows you to become still. Starting with your head, begin allowing your awareness to flow through your body, all the way down to your feet, settling on any contraction or tension and allowing release. When your body is completely relaxed, allow yourself to feel at ease and content as much as you can. If you notice any tension arising in your body or your mind, simply note it and return to complete relaxation and contentment. whenever you can. You may begin to feel total ease and rest, even for a moment or two. Now imagine you realize in your body that the end is near, that life is ebbing from you. Feel the finality of that sensation. Your mind now recalls the whole arc of your life and its story, as if you are viewing a mountain range. It passes over peak experiences, upward climbs, steep drops, and the long plateaus of ordinary living. The companions on your journey and different parts of your journey. All of the rich texture of your life. You begin losing sensation, cooling from your feet and upward. Maybe someone is there with you, notices, says, "It is time." You drop deeper and deeper into the ocean of time, leaving the world, turning within, settling down and down. Each breath savored until the last exhale. Energy leaving your body. And now there's only stillness and cessation. Rest there for a while. Now you may begin to return to the surface, feeling your breathing, your heart beating, your mind gearing up again, building its stories and its opinions, emotions coming back online, until gradually you're fully returned right here. You can open your eyes. So what was that like for you?
It was very peaceful. Really, that sense of there is nobody anymore. Not even the mind.
Yeah, there was a feeling for me of kind of dropping away, you know, all the things that are kind of like the tensions in my body that were kind of connected to all kinds of thinking and doing, and there was a real sense of that just going. And then my garage came into my head with all my stuff in it, you know, all the stuff that I cling to and has sentimental value. And then there was a kind of a real feeling of letting go of that, of why am I doing that? You know, I can just let go of that. So there was a kind of an internal feeling, and then it went to my garage of, you know, I can begin to let go of some things that I cling to, because why, you know, what are they going to mean when I'm not here? So yeah, but yeah, peaceful, like Sandra said, there was a real feeling of peacefulness in that bit where you said rest there a moment. It was like, oh, you know, such a feeling of not even, it was just a rest, like a rest, a real feeling of rest. Yeah, it was. And I do need to sort that garage out.
There's a book called Swedish Death Cleaning that's all about that.
I think I need to read it.
My sister was talking about it. Yeah, Swedish death cleaning. Yeah, it's what you do so your kids won't have to do it, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting, the meditation on one's own dying. When I was in the monastery, we had a 1-week session on the Buddha's parinirvana, so the dying of the Buddha. And so every day we had to do this meditation, like first imagining yourself in the zendo just sort of crumpling because you're losing it, you know, and the people rushing around and calling 911, but they can't really save you, and they're beating on your chest. And it's just this whole imagined realm of dying right there in the monastery, and how you know, and how they would do memorial services, but you're gone. And then we had to do a meditation on what was it, the day following your death, and then a meditation on a week following your death, and then a meditation on a year after your death, and then a meditation on 500 years after you're gone. You're just like, you know, the dust of bones blowing across a prairie. So it was a very profound meditation. So yes, I think it's interesting that nobody expressed like that it made them anxious. Did anybody feel anxious about it? Or distressed? Isn't that interesting?
I was surprised I didn't. I expected to, but I didn't.
Yeah, I really resented it when Chosen introduced this topic at the monastery. I was like, I do not want to sit here. I'm here for monastic practice. I do not want to sit here and think about my own death. That's not what I want to do, you know. But I thought it was amazing, the actual effect of it. And not just, as I said, you know, to make you cherish life, but there's something more profound about it. And I think this is why it's one of the traditional forms of meditation. Yeah. A lot of the Buddha's disciples would just go to charnel grounds, and, you know, they aren't even graveyards because they're burning people, but where they threw the dead bodies, they would just go and do meditation there. It's very clarifying. Like, you start to think, yeah, this thing I'm fretting about, it's not worth it. It's just not worth it. It's not that important.
I think we have Lisa with her hand up.
Yeah, Lisa.
So what's interesting to me is I didn't feel as anxious as I might when I had a cardiac event a few months ago, and I didn't know, it wasn't a big deal, but on the other hand, I have to take these stupid blood thinners that, you know, it's just this proliferation of a big change, right? So then I felt really vulnerable. But here, you know, I've got your lovely voice. We're doing this meditation. So it's different than I would feel if I were in isolation in a dark room without any voices. The voice, you know, is important to me because I don't feel alone. I feel supported. I feel comforted. You know, whereas if I were at a charnel ground where I'm the only person, I might feel terrified. So for me, I mean, I guess a lot of this is about whether I have kind of compassionate companions present.
But the thing, yeah, the thing that's interesting to me is the difference between the prediction of your experience and what the actual experience is. So
of being the fear of being alone.
Right, right. So when I, you know, I had a very dear Sangha member, Zen student, who was relatively young, I would say maybe in her early 40s, and she developed brain cancer. And she was a very luminous being. And the last time I visited her, she said to me, I'm just going deeper and deeper, and it's getting harder for me to come up to the surface and talk to people and see people. And I thought that was such a surprising kind of experience or expression. But for her, it was like more effortful having people around. So, and I think some folks who have experience with hospice have maybe seen some similar things, you know, where they literally, people will send their families away in order to die.
Well, both of my parents, for whom I was the primary caregiver, died when I was taking a respite,
right,
which was really interesting. I mean, the timing was pretty precise.
That's what Flint discovered when he was working with the dying in the cancer hospital, that people were actually picking the time that they would die. They were either waiting for someone to arrive or for some event to happen, or they were waiting for a moment when everyone was gone. And he began to see, oh, this is actually happening by intention. This isn't accidentally, those people went down the hall for lunch and now this person suddenly died. Like he realized, oh, it's not something that's entirely accidental, but something that people are determining themselves. Not, of course, you know, on a long term, but like in these very short-term windows. Yeah.
Yeah, an interesting aspect, my parents both had dementia. They were both in their early 80s. And I moved them into memory care in San Antonio. And so my father went first. I was away. And even though my mother, you know, was well into cognitive impairment, and I wasn't there, she said, to me, not when I returned. She said, Daddy did what he wanted to do. And she never called him Daddy, but it's like it was so poignant that she recognized that and expressed it. And it just seemed so wise and so right.
Was she talking about your daddy, or was she talking about her daddy?
Oh, I think it was my father, because her father died of a cerebral hemorrhage when he was away from home, and it was a shock. He was in Midland, Texas. It was a shock because he was just visiting, went to visit and take care of business. So I felt like it was my father. And she was sitting there on the bed, you know. Yeah, it was so unexpected coming from her that she would express herself that way. So there's a mystery of death right there. It's, you know, the way my parents died and the way I felt close to them for the first time in my life because they lost their cognitive abilities and habituation. And they were always very guarded and distant. So, I mean, around death and cognitive impairment, I had the best experience of them I ever had in my life.
So surprising, isn't it? It's so unexpected. Yeah, it's a gift. Well, many of you know the Buddha taught the 5 remembrances, right? That you should recall every day. The first one of which is, I am of the nature to grow old. There's no way to escape growing old. Well, there is one way to escape growing old. Daowu. 2, I am of the nature to have ill health. There's no way to escape having ill health. 3, I am of the nature to die. There's no way to escape death. 4, all that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature of change. There is no escape from being separated from them. And 5, my deeds are my closest companions. I am the beneficiary of my deeds. My deeds are the ground on which I stand. So this is the piece of it that's karma, right? My deeds are the ground on which I stand. And in the Zen tradition, we have this wonderful koan in the Blue Cliff record. It's case 55 of Daowu and Chen Yuan, who went to a house to make a condolence call. Yuan hit the coffin and said, alive or dead? Wu said, I won't say alive and I won't say dead. Yuan said, why won't you say? Wu said, I won't say. Halfway back, as they were returning, Yuan said, tell me right away, teacher. If you don't tell me, I'll hit you. Wu said, you may hit me, but I won't say. Yuan then hit him. Later, Daowu passed on. Yuan went to Shi Shuang and brought up the foregoing story. Shuang said, I won't say alive and I won't say dead. Yuan said, why won't you say? Shuang said, I won't say. I won't say. At these words, Yuan had an insight. Alive or dead? So what were Śuddhodana's questions? What did he ask his dad? I mean, his son, Buddha. And it's so interesting to me. I mean, he's watching all these funeral rites and these questions arise for him. So I'm going to give you the short version, and then I'm going to give you the elaborated version that's in the sutra. And I'll be sending this out to you. Short version. Śuddhodana asks, are beings consistently reborn as their own kind, with humans being reborn as humans, and so on? So in the belief system of that time, you could be reborn as a cockroach if you were bad, for example, right? So this is the question. Are beings consistently reborn as their own kind, with humans being reborn as humans, and so on? Here's the full version of that question. The great king Śuddhodana then asked the Blessed One, Blessed One, regarding the rebirths of beings who pass from this world to the next, are gods reborn as gods? Likewise, Are humans, animals, hungry ghosts, hell beings also reborn consistently as their own kind, respectively as humans, animals, hungry ghosts, and hell beings? Or is it the case, Blessed One, that when gods pass from this life, they are reborn as humans and other kinds of beings? Likewise, are humans, animals, hungry ghosts, and hell beings reborn as other kinds of beings, such as gods and so forth, as well? So that's the first question. Are beings consistently reborn as their own kind? The second question, do beings become utterly non-existent after death? Here's the full version of that. Or, Blessed One, when they pass from this life, do sentient beings become utterly non-existent, becoming like the ashes of a fire that has died out and not taking any rebirth at all? There are some who believed that. So there were some schools of teachings at that time that believed that. It's all over when it's over. And we have, that belief persists today. All of these beliefs can be found today as well. Third question, do beings after death accompany their dead ancestors and relatives in a world of death? So the full version, Blessed One, is it really as the worldly say it is? Do all the sentient beings live on after their deaths, befriending their kin in a beginningless lineage, including fathers, grandfathers, great-grandfathers, and more, not taking rebirth in a future life, but living just as they do in this life? Is there an afterlife that's the world of the dead? Question 4, short version. Is wealth and poverty consistent from life to life? Do the wealthy continue to be wealthy and the poor continue to be poor? So the long version of this is, Blessed One, do those who are wealthy and proud in this life go on to be wealthy and proud in the hereafter too? And do those who are poor and humble in this life go on to be poor and humble in the next? Or do people simply switch back and forth between the two? So if you're poor in this life, you get to be wealthy in the next life. So that has to do with, what are your fortunes? Do your fortunes continue along with you? Fifth question. Is enjoyment of clothes, mounts, and so on consistent from life to life? Do people continue to have the same clothes, horses, and so forth? Here's the long version. Blessed One, is it really as the worldly say it is? Those who in this life ride horses and elephants, wear fine clothes and ornaments, eat food and drink, do they continue to ride, wear clothes, and eat in the same way in their future lives? That's question number 5. Question number 6. The short version of this is, can one dedicate food and other offerings to the deceased and thus assure their perpetual welfare and nourishment? So you remember that the people at the funeral were putting out food and drink, and the long version is, Blessed One, is it really as the worldly say it is? So this is an important part of this question. Is it really as the worldly say it is? Because these are the beliefs that were around in that time. When their parents, siblings, and cousins, children, and so forth give or dedicate small portions of food or drink to someone who has passed from this world, is he then able to eat and drink inexhaustibly for many eons? And finally, last question. Do the dead show themselves to their relatives just as they were when they were alive? The full version is, Blessed One, is it really as the worldly say it is? When sentient beings pass on from this world, do they later, after death, tell their parents, siblings, children, etc., the same things, such as stories and so forth, that they had told them earlier before they died? And do they exhibit the same physical features to them later as they had earlier before death? Are they seen and heard to do this? So are we visited by the dead, looking just as they did when they were alive? Those are the questions. So we're going to talk about the answers next time, the Buddha's answers and how he responded to that. I'll tell you a little I think I've told before, but that it sort of touches on this. And that is when I was in the monastery, I was about 3 days from leaving. And I received word that my dear friend, John Slayton, was critically ill in the hospital. And they weren't really expecting him to live. And I didn't know whether I should leave, fly back. My car was out there. I didn't know whether to fly back to be close to him. He was married, he had a wife and, kids and everything. But he was such a close friend, and we had been such close partnership in the computer writing and research lab directing. So I was just torn, and I was sitting in meditation, and I thought, if only I could be right there by his side, holding his hand. And like that, I was transported right by his side, sitting next to his bed on one of those little hospital chairs, holding his hand. And we instantly rose up above ourselves. We were looking down, and we were flames. So he was a flame and I was a flame, and we were laughing. We were laughing so hard. We looked down and we said, "Look what they make us wear." And I said, "Mine is getting all wrinkled." And he said, "I think I got mine from the bottom of the heap." And we were just roaring with laughter, these flames. It was such a strange experience. And later, when he was telling me about that time, that crisis that he had in the hospital, there was a moment when he was quite ready to die. And he had a turn. And it was right about the time I had this experience. And he decided that he was going to live, even though it was going to be painful and difficult. So he came very, very close to dying. So I often think about that. We're all just these flames. And we inhabit these forms, but we're really just like a flame. Okay, so here's your homework. I'm going to send out this text with the questions in it. And don't be daunted by the scholarly stuff at the beginning, which is talking about the Tibetan translations and all that. Just go straight to the story if you like. Your homework is to do a little bit of writing. How would you answer Śuddhodana's questions? What do you think? How would you answer the 7 questions that Śuddhodana asked the Buddha? What do you think? And then you're also going to have a practice. You're going to practice with the koan, alive or dead. I'm going to send these things out to you, so don't worry. Okay. So how does that seem? Okay. You have thoughts about how you would answer those questions? It's a real challenge to the Buddha's knowledge. And of course, he's in the village, so all the villagers are standing around just waiting with bated breath to see what's the Buddha going to say about this. And all the Buddha's disciples, all standing around waiting to see what's going to happen out of these questions. So, and I will tell you, although this is a, early Tibetan Buddhist text, and not that doesn't seem to me necessarily that approachable for someone without some background in Buddhism, I did send it off to my brother's longtime girlfriend after he died. And she said to me, what does Buddhism say about death and dying? And I sent it off to her. And she wrote back and she said, this makes things very clear. So I thought, oh, okay, so it's not totally inaccessible to people who don't have a background in Buddhism. So we'll see what you think when I send it out to you. And we'll talk next week about the Buddha's answers. So all right, I'll let you go and enjoy your afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. I can see it's dark there where Maria is. She's probably ready to go to bed.
Okay. It's coming near 10.
Next week, and I will send these things along to you, don't worry. So you have something to go on here. Okay? All right. Bye-bye.
Great, thank you. Bye-bye.